This week, vulnerabilities in SSD encryption and how to detect them on your network, bypassing Windows UAC. A botnet is owning over 100,000 routers with an ancient security flaw that will come as no surprise. Google's hit with an IP hijack, and one thing you can do to make your internet safer and faster. Jason Wood from Paladin Security joins us for expert commentary on how Phineas Fisher got away with hacking Team Hacker. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Welcome to Hack Naked News, episode 196 for November 13th, 2018. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, and if you're interested in quality over quantity and having meaningful conversations instead of just a badge scan even, join us on April 1st through the 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort for InfoSec World 2019, where you can connect and network with like-minded individuals in search of actionable information. Use the registration code OS19-SECWEEK for 15% off the main conference or World Pass. And now, the security news. Introducing the Android Ecosystem Security Transparency Report. Wow, is that a mouthful? Google Play Protect, of course, is the built-in protection on Android devices that scans over 50 billion apps daily from inside and outside of Google Play. These scans look for evidence of potentially harmful applications, or PHAs. If the scan finds a PHA, Google Play Protect warns the user and can disable or remove the PHAs. I just love that we created a new acronym because we just needed more of those. In Android's first annual Android Security Year in Review from 2014, fewer than 1% of devices had PHAs installed. The percentage has declined steadily over time, and this downward trend continues through 2018. The Transparency Report covers PHA rates in 3 areas. Market segment, meaning whether a PHA came from Google Play or outside of Google Play, the Android version, and the country. The most obvious takeaway for me in this story is the most recent version of Android has less PHAs or potentially harmful apps. So, I mean, there's a lot of insert obligatory advice in this show today. And the first is, well, make sure you update your Android. And if your carrier does not, then switch to a phone that lets you get the latest version of Android, because that's what I do, I guess. Anyway, one thing you can do to make your internet safer and faster, other than updating Android to the latest version, this is a nice way to secure your DNS traffic and something you can put on your friends and family members' phones that aren't security nerds like many of us. The article goes on to state that anytime you're on a public internet connection, people can see what sites you visit. Even worse, your ISP is very possibly selling all of your browser history to the highest bidder. It's collecting that information over, you guessed it, DNS. That's why they've made a tool called 1.1.1.1.1.1, the 4 ones, which makes it to get faster, more private internet experience. It has historically been too complex for people to use, particularly on mobile devices. They have released an app, and everyone you know can use it and go to 1.1.1.1, and it's free. And you can download it and put it on your phone today. And I'm assuming it makes a secure connection. This is from Cloudflare, by the way. The app from Cloudflare allows you to make a secure connection to their public DNS service, so that your ISP can't snoop on your internet browsing traffic, even on your mobile device, because you put this app and it does all the config for you. Pretty cool stuff. Vulnerabilities in SSD encryption. This article is about using osquery to identify vulnerable Windows machines. Some really good practical advice to deal with the latest flaw in SSD encryption that we covered on Paul Security Weekly last week. The article goes on to state that it will allow you to take a look at how you can identify which systems are running BitLocker and if they've been configured to the default the SSD's hardware encryption, which some of which had vulnerabilities that we discussed last week. And then they review some possible steps to fix configurations and remove the vulnerability for good. Awesome article about how to find a flaw and fix it on your network. Love it. Practical advice. Next story, researcher bypasses Windows UAC even by spoofing the trusted directory. A security researcher from my former employer, Tenable, recently discovered that it is possible to bypass Windows user account control by spoofing the execution path of a file in a trusted directory. The researcher also published a proof of concept code for the UAC bypass technique. All the resources are available in the show notes at wiki.securityweekly.com. We link to all the original research so you can go check it out. Hacking the hacker's IoT botnet, the author adds his own backdoor on top of the ZTE router backdoor. This is a backdoor for your backdoor. A backdoor in a backdoor. Backdoor squared. So a weaponized IoT exploit script is being used by script kiddies making use of a vendor backdoor account to hack the ZTE routers. Ironically, this is not the only backdoor in the script because Scarface, the propagator of this code, has also deployed his own custom backdoor to hack any script kiddie that's using the script. So you can thank the author of the backdoor for the additional backdoor. Any case. Between you, me, and the dodgy-looking USB, a little bit of paranoia never hurt anyone. What would you do in this situation? The author describes this situation that happened recently, arriving at a recent conference organized by one of the government's many regulatory bodies. I received in my obligatory lanyard and something else, a credit card shaped emblazoned with branding for the event. What is this? He asks. Oh, that's a USB key. He says, I presume the conference organizers mistook my wild-eyed stare of disbelief as one of benevolent gratitude and admiration for their consideration of my storage needs. What could have thought this gift was a good idea? Well, it's a really good reason not to distribute USB keys as, well, very few users are going to actually trust them. That has made its way into both mainstream and tech journalism. As we've covered this in lots of other different scenarios. I want to say the Olympics in Korea was another one where they got USB drives, and it was just all over the news about, hey, should we trust this? Now, nothing in the story pointed that anything malicious was on these drives. However, that is always out there. So why are you still distributing drives? When you do, people are going to write articles like this, and we're going to cover them on the show and drone on and on about them. So I'll stop now and go on to the next story about a botnet that's pwning 100,000 routers using an ancient security flaw. So this is just becoming common to me. No one patches flaws on routers. They're vulnerable to things such as universal plug-and-play vulnerabilities. Then someone creates a botnet. This botnet covers 116 devices, including models from D-Link, Cisco, Linksys, of course now Belkin, T-Link, TP-Link, Zixel, Broadcom itself, and several others. Insert the obligatory turn off universal plug and play and update your router firmware, and don't put it directly on the or expose the management interface to the internet and all those other things that we talk about that no one ever does. The domain that you forgot to renew, yeah, it's now stealing credit cards. Brian Krebs is reporting on the story. He says if you own a domain name that gets decent traffic and you fail to pay its annual renewal fee, chances are this mistake will be costly for you and potentially others. Lately, neglected domains have been getting scooped up by crooks who use them to set up fake e-commerce sites that steal credit card details from unwary shoppers. Makes sense that attacks would exploit this situation. Full details are on the Krebs on Security blog. Google's hit with an IP hijack, taking down several services in the oops category. Google G Suite yesterday had much of its traffic rerouted through Russia and dropped off at China Telecom, according to the network intelligence company Thousand Eyes. Thousand Eyes at this time reported Google was victimized by a border gateway or BGP hijacking attack, which is ever so common. Google confirmed that there was an issue, but it does not believe it was done intentionally. Yet, traffic ended up in Russia, in China, by accident. Okay, Google. Oh, sorry. I think I just triggered you. Never mind. Sorry. I won't do that again. I promise. Okay, Google. I mean, after that, I won't do it again. Hackers changed the WordPress site URL to Pastebin. This article starts off from original research that pointed out attack patterns from Siteurl, and they report that they've noticed a growing number of WordPress-based sites that have had their URL settings changed to some really strange-looking site name that's not Pastebin. Further investigations show that this issue is related to a vulnerability, and you guessed it, a WordPress plugin. This one's on GDPR compliance, which is a plugin for WordPress with over 100,000 active installations. The link to the original research from Siteurl is in there. And recently, it was reported that sites are now being redirected to a Pastebin site. Again, insert my obligatory standard WordPress advice on updating your WordPress, PHP, and all of your plugins. And hopefully that's the last story because my teleprompter has stopped working. And we're going to take a short break. Come back. Jason Wood from Paladin Security has the scoop in our expert commentary section on the Phineas hacker. Stay tuned.
Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/HNN. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Welcome back, everyone. I have no idea what I'm saying. Pay no attention to whatever I'm saying. Oh, it is the Phineas Fisher hacker. I was referencing Phineas and Ferb, apparently. But it was right. The hacking team hacker, Phineas Fisher, has gotten away with it. And I'd like to welcome none other than Jason Wood to talk about this story. Jason, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Good to be here with you again.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is a wild read that was published on Motherboard yesterday. I recommend everybody go check out the show notes on it. Paul, I'd be interested, if you have any thoughts to chime in as I'm talking about this. But the story is basically that 3 years ago, there is a company named Hacking Team that was broken into by an attacker who goes by the moniker of Phineas Fisher, which I also connect with Phineas and Ferb. But the attacker basically got in, pillaged the heck out of Hacking Team, published sensitive emails, files, and even better, all of their source code, published it all in a 400 gigabyte torrent file, which was
was that recent that he published the torrent file? He had a Pastebin that I read that was a very detailed account of how he got in. And so this is more information that's come out?
Yeah, I guess when they did the breach, they basically pulled everything they could out of it, and they hit a point where they couldn't realize they couldn't suck anything else out of the company at that point.
Yeah,
they published it, and I think this is what came out 3 years ago. Actually, was the actual dump.
I gotcha. Yeah, because there was a great write-up of how they got in, and then of course they stole a lot of their tools and all of that stuff, and then published that in 400 gigs apparently, their source code and everything.
Yeah, which is not good when you are a company that's writing surveillance and offensive security tools and selling them to governments. Nobody likes having their intellectual property published, but this one gives it a little bit more of a black eye, I guess, just based on what they do. Hacking Team is actually an Italian company, and the investigation has been going on for a while about this. What is interesting about this story is that one, you have the detailed write-up by Phineas Fisher that it was published by him or them, but also the Italian prosecutors have requested early this year, I believe, to closed the investigation, and a judge a few months ago has written up her opinion, agreeing to that to close out the investigation, because basically there are no more leads to follow. Motherboard got a hold of some court documents and stuff like that through some requests for information, hence the timing for their report here. Essentially, though, this means the attacker, Phineas Fisher, has gotten away with it. The investigating government agency has decided they're done. They've washed their hands of this. You might not think this is too shocking, because attackers do get away with what they do. But what's unusual here is that Fisher is basically making comments online. Even did a really off-the-wall interview via a puppet. Essentially, Motherboard's reporters were contacting the group or person and requesting an interview, and they said they would do it as long as they had some kind of puppet that they would then read their chats and act like it was sitting there for the interview. There's a video on Motherboard if you want to go watch that. It's kind of
I
fun.
kind of do now, actually.
Yeah, it looks like a pale Kermit the Frog.
It's awesome.
Sitting there, complete with poses, with hands on the counter and body language and the whole bit. It's kind of funny. So it's kind of surprising in some ways. Basically, that Phineas Fisher was able to practice good operational security throughout all of this, through the breach, through the dumping of the data, and going on into having some level of a public profile and discussing the attack. Usually when criminals start talking about things is where they start slipping up and getting caught. The breach itself appears to have been pretty dang embarrassing because it was basically through an unpatched firewall and VPN implementation. To add some insult to the injury, the firewall had already had an updated system in place. It was waiting to be decommissioned, but the decommissioning never happened because one person was using that firewall and held the whole thing up. The Motherboard article doesn't say who that was, but it kind of hints that it might have been the CEO of Hacking Team. And the end result was all their data gets stolen and published online. Hacking Team CEO David Vincenzetti blamed 5 former employees for the attack and went on to press charges. 3 years later, now we have the judge writing up her opinion, and I quote says, and I quote, "It's clear that such a theory is completely groundless and has not found any confirmation in any of the evidence acquired during the investigation," end quote. So basically, the judge is saying this is absolutely bunk, and the 5 employees were found innocent. End of the saga. Nobody knows who Phineas Fisher is. How many people are they? Do they have somebody bankrolling them? Who's behind this identity? Like I said, the interesting thing is they actually have 2 very public breaches. They have both of their breaches are against companies of this sort, Hacking Team and another one called Finn Fisher, which I assume is where they got their moniker from. They appear to have a political bent and an agenda around this, not like in companies that do this sort of work. And they were skilled enough to commit the operations and still remain anonymous. They haven't, at least at this point, made any mistakes that investigators were able to find.
It's pretty impressive, actually, that they've done this to 2 basically companies that are professional hackers, and they're able to hack into those companies and keep it anonymous. That's pretty impressive. Yeah,
and like I said, doing this puppet interview and write-ups and stuff like that, and that's pretty wild that they've done this and talked as much as they have and still not been able to be caught. So obviously, there's not much of a recommendation for this article. It's just an interesting read. This end point here really is that can attackers stay unknown or anonymous online? And the answer is yes, they can at least at this point in time. They just have to work at it. They have to plan ahead. They are probably going to use stolen funds, Bitcoin in this case. Phineas Fisher used stolen Bitcoin to stand up infrastructure and things like that to disassociate any financial trail back to them. But with that effort and some planning, they were able to get it done. Check out the Motherboard articles, and yeah, as Paul mentioned, there's the write-up from Phineas Fisher themselves on what they did and how they did things, and 2 articles in the show notes here by Motherboard for your viewing pleasure, and that's also where they have the video of the Puppet interview. So go ahead, take a look at it, and enjoy.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much. And with that, we'll conclude this episode of Hack Naked News. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.